housing update, believe it or not, for July of 2024. I can't believe where this time gone. And Cheryl Stokes, you're back in the house.
Back. So excited.
Cheryl and I started this pre-COVID, and then she took a little hiatus, and we're back. Glad to have her back. So welcome back. Let's jump into it. Cheryl, you know how I hate to read. So tell me what Lawrence Yun is talking about.
Okay, so home sales have lingered at 30-year lows, and since 70 million more Americans live in the country now compared to 3 decades ago, it is inevitable that sales will rise in coming years. Inventory will grow steadily from more home construction, and various life-changing events will require people to trade up, trade down, or move to another location. People are still going to move.
They're still going to move. And I think we've all had the henny pennies go, the world is falling apart, the sky is coming down, the houses are going to go to zero, and no one's going to move anymore. And that's just not true.
Not true. Hasn't happened. People are still moving, buying, selling, just like always.
Yeah, just like always. So, which brings us to the next slide of 2024 total home sales forecast. They're all pretty flat, Cheryl, right? I mean, 4.8 is the lowest and 5 million is the highest of homes that will be sold in 2024, across the nation. Pretty consistent.
Pretty standard average.
Mm-hmm. So tell us what Lawrence Yun is continuing to say.
Well, Lawrence is saying that the market is at an interesting point with rising inventory and lower demand. Supply and demand movements suggest easing home price appreciation in upcoming months. Inevitably, more inventory in a job-creating economy will lead to greater home buying, especially when mortgage rates descend.
Yeah, which is what they are suggesting with home price forecasts. It's not a negative number for the top 7.
Correct. And it's really not a negative number at all. Prices are still going to increase, just not as fast.
Exactly. That's a great point. Because that's the other thing we hear a lot. The sky is falling. Prices are going to go to zero. That is not what these analysts are saying.
No.
And we're not even seeing a negative number out there, which is wonderful. All right. So Jessica Lautz, Deputy Chief Economist at NAR, what's she saying?
She says one thing that seems to be pretty solid is that home prices are going to continue to go up, which we just discussed. And the reason is that we don't have housing inventory. Inventory is rising, but we are still low.
Right. We're still low. Now, I love this slide, Cheryl, because it talks about a buyer's market and it talks about a seller's market. This is a national number right now of months of inventory, which is somewhere, it's less than 6 months nationally. So we're seeing markets that really are getting multiple offers. They're moving pretty quickly because there's no inventory. We'll give you our numbers at the end of this, so stay tuned. Watch for the numbers that we have in Southwest Florida. But what's near to your heart is mortgage rates.
Mortgage rates. These are the projections for the end of the year and going into 2025. We've all heard that we think we're going to get a decrease in rates in September. We're going to get the Fed rate decreased. But overall, they're going to start to trend downward.
Which is great. Which I think from this next slide of a 30-year fixed rate, they're looking at 24 and 25. That's that trending downward.
Correct.
Now, I know you love this slide.
My favorite slide.
It's your favorite in the whole deck.
We've all been waiting. So this is where everybody is saying that we're going to see a decrease in September. Now, what this doesn't say, which everyone is hoping for, and there are a few people out there saying that once this begins, we're going to have 3 to 4, maybe even 5 more follow it into 2025. Now, I know we thought that might happen in 24, but this is the indicator that we're on our way.
Well, and I think 24 is a different year, and we're going to talk about election years and what all that does to the world at large. But, I think it really has taken a little bit more, and they're afraid that if they drop it too fast, that inflation will go back up.
Right. It's a balance. I mean, that is what all this is about.
That's right. So we have another, don't you love to read, Cheryl?
Yes, this is a long one.
So tell me what this professor at New York
Okay, so
University.
Dennis Shurshikoff.
I let her read that name.
From City University in New York says, when it comes to the real estate forecast for the next 5 years, he's cautiously optimistic. I believe we're going to see a lot of ebb and flow over the next 5 years, some highs, some lows, but overall a healthy market. Prices should continue to rise, though more slowly, And buyers might enjoy more options as inventory expands. But remember, real estate is profoundly local, which we know. What happens on a national scale can manifest differently in your backyard. And that is so true. It's all about what's going on in your market.
That's right. And, it's funny because we do business with a bunch of realtors that are buying for themselves in our area that come from a different area. And I loved it. I was talking with an agent who was putting an offer in on one of my listings, and her client was the agent from somewhere else. And he got this epiphany that our market is different. Right? It was just like a shock. It was like, ta-da! Exactly. I love what you did. And so, it is different everywhere. And even if you're a real estate professional or somebody that's dealing with that, it's going to be very regionalized.
Yes.
And we see that so much here because we have a lot of buyers from different areas.
And that's why you should speak to someone local who understands what's going on in their neighborhood.
That's right. That's right. Oh, so true on that. There's so many things I could say to that, Cheryl, but I'll keep my mouth shut on that. Anyway, so the question everybody's asking is what's happening in 2024 with the election year? So we thought we'd go back and do some history talking during this process. So go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, so presidential election years affect the national housing market and mortgage rates through 3 interrelated channels: uncertainty, policy expectations, and consumer confidence. This is because many consumers may choose to postpone major purchases or sales until they gain greater confidence in the country's future direction.
We're seeing that.
Yes.
And it just so happens to coincide with our seasonality of our season because we're in our low season.
Right.
High season's in the winter. Everybody wants to come and buy in the winter. And it's slower
It
in the
feels
summer.
different for us because this is when we're down anyway.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So it feels a little bit more down in my opinion, but people are still buying.
They are.
I tell that to people. I mean, we're still busy.
Yes.
Not the same busy, but we're still busy. So let's talk about that a little bit, Cheryl. Recent elections and economic uncertainty. This is 5 different election periods?
Yep.
And out of the 5, they were crazy. Like
there was something every time.
08, what crazy
Housing crisis, financial crisis in general.
Crisis.
Yes.
And then 12, healthcare, Supreme Court, European debt crisis. Ooh, we heard crisis twice.
2016 Brexit.
Brexit. Who can remember Brexit? If you're too young, ask us. We'll tell you. What about 20?
I mean, you got to throw in a pandemic, right? We
have to. That there was one.
Yes.
And then in 24, we have now the high inflation.
Yes.
So, and a war.
And a war.
Real issues that are affecting it. So go ahead and tell us what Allie Wolf is saying from Zonda.
Usually home sales are unchanged compared to a non-election year, with the exception of November. In an election year, November is slower than normal. And that's because they're all like holding their breath.
Right.
For 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. The breath holding for 2 weeks. Make sure you breathe because that would be bad.
That would be bad.
You might die after that. But, I love this slide, Cheryl, because it talks about seasonal drop in sales are sharper in election year than it is in a non-election year. So look at these non-election years. So seasonality. So whatever your low market is. So in our time, it's summer.
Right.
Summer and fall. Right? Midsummer to mid-fall.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying nationally it's 9.8% down.
Right. On average.
But in an election year, it's 15.9.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Everyone's watching.
Yeah, right. They're uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I love about this is 9 of the last 11 elections, presidential election years, home sales in units went up after.
Right. So they all collectively held their breath in late October, early November. And then when everything was fine, they went right back to normal. We all have to buy and sell. We all have reasons that we have to buy and sell.
Absolutely. It's the reason. So what does Ryan Lundquist say?
He says an election year doesn't alter the price trend that is already happening in the market.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's look at that. When you look at election years, this is based on prices going up. 7 out of the last 8 election years, the prices went up after.
Correct. And that would follow our trend because we are not projecting a downward turn, just a slower rise.
Exactly. I love the way you say that. It's very sexy. Slower rise. So talk about what happened with new prices, because that's basically new home sales. What happened with their prices? Same concept?
Same concept. There's only one down year following 1, 2, 3, what are there? 11 election seasons.
And what year was that? That was an interesting
2009 again, 2008, 2009, housing crisis.
Right.
Everything was down at that point. It had nothing to do with the election, really.
Exactly. So what does Allie Wolf continue to say?
In December following an election and in the following year, the sales that are lost during November are recovered. It isn't that consumers say, I'm nervous and never want to buy.
Right.
They say, I'm nervous, let's wait and see what happens.
Yes. And we are seeing some of that.
Yes.
I mean, and you measure that with interest rates, which we're going to talk about here. Let's talk about interest rates. So what happened in 8 of the last presidential elections?
Interest rates went down before, which is what we're saying. We're hoping that we have a decrease in September leading into the election.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. So give us a summary on this section.
So to summarize, for most Americans, election results will have little direct effect on their income and therefore should not significantly impact their decision to buy or sell.
Yeah, that's what we're going to see.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen it before. Now, current market. We talked about, how much inventory is out there. The rest of the U.S. or averaged across the U.S. is under 6 months. Right now, all of Southwest Florida, from Marco Island, Naples, Bonita, Estero, Fort Myers, Cape, anything that's in our MLS is 6.7 months.
So just a little bit more.
A little bit more. And we're neutral. That's a stable market. That's not a crazy seller's market we've just seen or a crazy buyer's market that I came into. The other thing I wanted to talk about was homes for sale. I love this slide, Cheryl, because what it tells us right now in, July, these are June data for July. There were 5,546 homes with a rolling 12 months. Has gone up significantly in the last year. However, we were almost at 0 homes back in 21, 22.
Correct. That's what I keep telling people is that, yes, inventory has increased, but we're still below where we were.
Yeah.
Even like 2018, 2019, we're still down.
That's right.
So it's still a good mix of the market.
And that you can see here, I didn't put on the slide, Cheryl, but December of 2020 had basically 5,500 homes that were on the market. So that was in the pandemic.
Right.
Let's face it, everybody took their home off if they could in March when the thing started, and we started to see it open up again. And
then it went to 0.
And then it went to 0.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of that. And last but not least, I really wanted to hit on this election year increases. So in the last 3, we've had, which is, this is all the data I had to go back that I could really analyze. Yeah. So I looked at November of 20 into November of 22. Okay. I looked at November of 16 into 17. And then I looked at November of 12 into 13. So a couple things happened, 20 to 21, pandemic. So the prices shot up during that time in that anyway. So let's take that off.
It was a feeding frenzy.
It was a feeding frenzy. Let's look at, 16 into 17. Well, we had this little thing called Ian. It was a wind event.
Yes.
Hit Marco Island really, really hard. So our numbers went down.
Yep.
Because people were afraid. They didn't know. Those that were afraid that were
Roofs
selling
were
jumped
on the
out.
street.
Yes. It was
not good.
It was not good. And a third of our homes needed new roofs. And I wish I had gotten one then because it would have been in my insurance. But instead I put one on a few years later. But enough of that. So really when we look at back and we go to 12 to 13, Cheryl, what I find most interesting about this is both Fort Myers, Naples, Marco were all 10% increases.
Yep.
And Cape Coral, Cape went up 20%.
Right. They were the outlier. But the whole point here is in every case, there have been increases except for the year that we had a hurricane.
That's right. And even then, 3 of the markets had an increase.
Right.
The Cape had one, Fort Myers had one, and Naples had one. Not quite as significant because people don't know where Florida is. which is kind of crazy.
And hurricanes are funny. They affect pockets differently. They don't affect the whole area.
Right. Exactly. So, Cheryl, I think the point of all this is it's a great time to buy.
It's a great time to buy.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's a great time to sell if this is when it's time to sell because there's less inventory.
Yep.
We know we're going to get more. Mm-hmm. And, the question is it a great time to move?
Well, my answer to this.
Yeah.
It is always a great time to move. There's always a reason to buy or sell. You're upsizing, you're downsizing, you're relocating, you're helping children get their first home. It's always a great time to move.
Exactly. So with that said, I'm Mary Bartos with the Bartos Group of Premier Plus and my friend and colleague,
Cheryl Stokes, New American Funding.
We look forward to seeing you here in Paradise, answering any questions that we can about buying or selling.